Thank you all for having me. I feel like a little odd I feel like I'm like the only Southerner in the room. Woo! Hey, boys. I'm really happy to be here. I feel like a real oddball in East Tennessee that doesn't ever get to talk about um, this stuff. And none of my neighbors know what agroforestry or silvopasture is. Neither does my NRCS agent. So it's really exciting to be able to come and talk to y'all. So my understanding was this session was supposed to be about kind of climate and environmental context and how that drives silvopasture design. And I thought this session made sense for me because my kind of little contribution to the field thus far has been kind of a reaction to getting specifications, getting guidelines, seeing case studies in the way it was done elsewhere, and then going, well, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work. In most cases, it's because I've actually tried it before. So East Tennessee is a little bit different. Obviously, the climate is different here, but the farm context, I think, is also different from kind of like what Julie Hager said this morning. I feel like I come at this from a slightly different perspective, so I'll share a little bit of that with you all. And I think that informs how I ended up, making silvopasture work for us. So yeah, I grew up on a family farm, and I don't know if Josh is still here, but when he was talking about growing up working on and we actually, I started growing, when I was growing up, we farmed tobacco, the 13-month crop. And so it was a lot of family interaction. There's a lot of work more than picking up rocks and sticks to do for a little kid. And so that's what our family did. And you could make a living on a really small amount of tobacco, or at least you could. And then that changed in about 97, 98, I think it was, when they outsourced tobacco. And our region has never recuperated. The small farms have never recuperated. My life has kind of progressed as all of our barns have kind of, kind of fallen apart over time. So you drive around our community and the productive capacity is just really lost, and it shows economically. There's a lot of young guys that don't have a lot of options. We have a lot of social ills, a lot of economic problems, and hard to find meaning, and really hard to find even worthwhile part-time employment, much less full-time employment on those small farms. So one of the things that we've tried to do, our farm's been around since 1919. And so we've got a lot of infrastructure in place. We were doing cattle because where we live, it's like this everywhere. So we've only got small patches that are flat enough to grow tobacco. And you have to move the tobacco around. All the areas that aren't in tobacco, you would typically run with cattle. So when we quit doing tobacco, we moved entirely to cattle. We worked about 20 years on our genetics. About 20 years ago, my parents got a hold of Jim Garish's book, and we went from 5 bales per winter per animal to 1 bale per winter per animal. So we've got our grazing management pretty well dialed in, water systems, fencing systems. And so that's more than a lot of most young farmers going in. Obviously, the land is the biggest cost, but then all the infrastructure is just like even more. So our idea was, let's employ other people. Let's give them, if they want a full-time job farming, let's give them a full-time job farming. So we employ about 7 full-time people and 2 to 4 part-time, depending on how you count. It's a family farm. We manage about 1,000 acres, and most of that is for cattle. We run a cow-calf operation as well as a grass finishing operation. So we do both of those on the same land, but they're technically 2 different businesses. And then we also do hogs, layers and broilers, and sheep. And we like to consider ourselves a regenerative farm. That word has kind of become a trendy word. But we do a lot of different environmental things. And when I came back to the farm, I left my previous job and working for the government and had that for too long. When I came back, I was like, how can I bring my environmental background to farming and kind of fix the things that I see that are wrong? And we'd already made a lot of moves in that direction, I think, but managing our pastures and woodlands better. And then implementing new silvopasture was kind of what I got involved with. So yeah, right now I've got 400 trees in the program. They're all just shade trees. They're actually all under carbon contract. I could answer questions about that if you'll have them. But they're shade trees, and my goal was like to get the tree to grow. I've been planting trees and flowers and shrubs in cattle fields since I was a little girl, and they all died. And so mortality was 100%. And so as I started to formalize it, I had to get real serious about tree protection. I've tried just about everything out there. And I kept reading about things that other people would do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try that. And just none of it would work. None of it would work. And my mortality was, even with good weather, my mortality over the first 5 years, I would say, was over 75%. In some plantings, it would be 90 or 100% within the first few years. So, I mean, basically, I was just doing it wrong. And I was hoping there was a right way to do it. I was a little worried there was no way to do it. But the primary causes of mortality were, drainage issues, too much water, too little water. But we have a pretty good climate, and I won't go into depth on what our climate is just because I'll be talking for way too long, but I can get back into that if need be. But we have a very rich, luscious climate where trees just grow like weeds. So generally the weather, provides. But the other things where cattle can kill our trees in a variety of different ways, and they can also get bush hogged over. My dad can bush hog anything. So after several years of experimentation, I now have a protection system that I believe is much like Austin's. It's a planter tube with polywire between the tubes. I run the polywire on the top so the cattle can go under the base, and then I wrap the polywire halfway down the tube. And that has been incredibly successful. So now that mortality is just reversed. I basically practically get 90 to 100% success on all my plantings now. And I reduce the cost from, early on when I wasn't keeping great records is a little bit hard to say, but it was like as upwards of like 50 to, depending on how you count, like $100 per living tree if you count long enough for all that mortality to catch up with you. It's a very expensive process. Of course, when your mortality is 100%, that's kind of infinite dollars per living tree. But anyway, over time, my goal was like, I was trying to make sense of it. And I was like, what can I kind of sell this to my family for if we're going to have shade trees? And my goal was like $25 a tree. And I've gotten, I need to update this number, but I've gotten it down to, as of like a year and a half ago, I had per living tree at 2 years, all materials and labor for like about $24. And so I considered that a great success. So now we have kind of my archetype that seems to work. And not only are the trees surviving, but they're also just growing great. And that's mainly due to how great the planter tubes are. I do not sell them. But I am kind of religious about these tubes. I'll use them even when I don't need to protect them from grazers just because they're such great tubes for growing tall, straight trees and everything. But yeah, now, so we've figured out the shade thing. And then, I knew that's one of the things is like farm context. And I might, Dusty might have questions about that too. So I'll put off a little bit more of our farm context, but essentially we're cattle farmers, burgers pay the bills for us. And so, initially going into it, I did not want to have to fool with, also, I've been farming since I was a kid. Everyone's like, oh, what a blessing. I'm like, you mean burden? Like, it's 1,000 friggin' acres. It's like 14 barns. I never sleep. Like, do you know how much one roof costs? I never sleep, so it's just like, that's my attitude. And so when people are like, why don't you grow trees that you also have to gather pecans from? I'm like, what? No, like, that sounds awful. I'm trying to make my job easier. So that was the initial thing, is like shade trees were our critical reason for doing it. And I think that's similar to a lot of folks with silvopasture as opposed to other types of agroforestry. We'll list a million different reasons to do it, but what's your critical reason? For us, it was shade, and not just directly. I could talk more about the indirect benefits of shade and how they benefit our grazing management program. It kind of drives improved capacity across the farm, whether it's under the tree or not. But I really focused on just getting the trees for shade. And then once I've got them, I'm hoping with the EAP to take on an additional purpose for those trees, which might have an additional income stream. But up until now, we've just been focused on that. But